All right, good morning, guys. We're gonna try and take this terrain full through and through. So tomorrow, the original idea was to take this terrain and split it up into 2 or 3 different biomes. So maybe down here in this section we have a biome, or somehow I can't really mask out where I want a custom biome yet, which is unfortunate. But I was gonna at least kind of go over the biome features, but a quick update. Tomorrow's stream is going to have to unfortunately be pushed to next week. It'll either be a week from today or a week from tomorrow. It just depends. I had some things pop up during my time slot for tomorrow. So it's unfortunate that I won't be able to do anything tomorrow. But I am going to continue this particular landscape. And I am going to have this maybe be 4 or 5 sessions instead of just 3 for this landscape. The 4th and 5th session is going to be a little secret treat. We're going to plug this into an outside program, but I'm not going to talk about which program or programs those are yet. But we're going to take this terrain and basically transfer it outside of this program for the first time on this live stream. So that should be a fun and interesting sort of breakdown that we haven't done before yet. Let's see. Well, there was one thing I wanted to talk about first. Oh yeah. So today is basically just going to be texturing and whatnot. So we'll go over some different texturing techniques, texturing things, and what you should do. But I wanted to point out first, again, the map tiler stuff is you can actually, instead of using the map tiler strictly for its height map and texturing to capture from, we can capture just the textures. So let's go here and use the satellite data. But let's just say we wanted to zoom in back again on Iceland. Being a little sluggish for me, and I don't know why, but that's okay. We can zoom in quite nicely. So when this catches up, we should be able to use the satellite data. Hopefully. It takes a bit of time for this information to pop in. I think there might be a bug at one point in time. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it just took a little bit of time. So on my terrain, you can see that the satellite image has overlaid itself. So I just wanted to quickly throw out that you don't have to line up the height map and textures from Map Tiler's imagery. You can, if you like a mask, say, hey, I really like this snow or mask here, but I want to use that mask, or this these water formations here, or this erosion here in my area, and maybe paint that somehow. Then you can totally do that. Later, whenever custom masking is finally available, we can use this pipeline for grabbing pieces of satellite for masking itself. So literally, if I wanted to grab this white texture here as a mask to use anywhere, then I could use it and rotate it and use this mask as a biome, or use this mask for filters, or use this mask strictly for textures, whatever you want it to be used for. So also, we're going to keep this here, and we're going to add a new material. And I covered this a little bit in, I covered this a little bit in one of the dev streams on how to mask for texturing out of the satellite image. So again, the materials are going to stack up just like in Photoshop. So this top texture here is going to rule over the bottom texture. And stop me if anything that I am saying doesn't make sense, or you want me to slow down and break down the process even further. All right. So most of the time, as a rule of thumb, I like to, since being able to see what part of the terrain your filters or your textures are affecting isn't here yet. Like we can't really see the heat maps that we could see from World Creator 2 in order to see where things are being distributed on. I just like to do a quick cheat, and before I actually apply the texture or change whatever color this is going to be, I make it the starting out color a stark red. That way I can actually see what I am doing as far as distribution. And I'll do a little simple technique on what this is going to do in a little bit too. But so right now I've got red covering the entire terrain. So if I went to go to down here where it says add distribution, we can choose the distribution rule of a satellite image down here in the bottom of this list. So if I choose the satellite image, you can already see that that red is kind of being tailored to the, let me zoom out of here, make it a little easier. Yeah, let's go straight up and down like this. There we go. So now you can see that this sort of texture is based off of this image, obviously. So we can then, with this red, kind of influence where it's going to be adhered to on the terrain. And that's all based off this target color. So it's looking for stark white, which is obviously this sort of range, and it's feathered some areas out. But we can adjust how much white is the influence or the range of white. So that's what this color distance is. So if I wanted to really try to find in this satellite image the pure whites, then I need to lower this top range a little bit so that you're lowering the top value or bottom value. If I go increase the bottom value, it's going to obviously make the entire thing super influenced, and it's going to cover the whole terrain. So the top value here is going to lower the influence or it's kind of, think of this color distance as a color ramp node in Blender, which that's a different task altogether, or to think it's sort of color range instead of color distance. So we'll lower this top value to get the sort of height to capture pure white closer. So all the way to the left, what's in pure red here is as close to the target color, which is pure white. And if I increase that, obviously it feathers out just a little bit. And I can shift this slider a little bit together to blend some of that out. So you can see that the red is now what's going to be painted here. We can change that target color. You can see the eyedropper tool. And has everyone here seen the, I think it was the last state of development where I covered on how to use the eyedropper tool and how that's influencing what you're capturing, if that makes sense. Similarly, if you select the target color and just pick somewhere in here, you can change. You don't have to use the eyedropper tool. I'm just clicking in this window here to select the color influence. But you can also do the eyedropper tool. So hovering. Yep, that's correct. Spacebar. So I'm hovering over, let's say, this blue, the water here. And I'm going to just press spacebar. And you see it's selecting a couple areas. Let me get closer. The only problem with the eyedropper tool is that they're going to change this. So there's going to hopefully be a ring, a circle around the mouse here so that you can see the sort of area that it's influencing, because it's capturing an average of pixels around the mouse to get that color. But for this, it's best to just do it in this window, since it's based on pixel by pixel or a sharper, more accuracy. So if I were to try and pick the watercolor here, you can see it's going to pick all the watercolor here. And I can go up here and change this color to be whatever I want. If I make it completely pink this way, and if I were to go back to this and hide, let's add a new material right here. And let's make this one black. All right, so this is another good way. If you like the masking of using the satellite image, you make sure the satellite image is the bottom color, and you can just hide it and use it strictly for referencing if you want. But you don't have to have that. You can just use the satellite image that you've captured as the masking function. Plain and simple. So I'm going to remove, let's keep that. And let's double click. I double right clicked the top texture here. And let's just change its influence to be the white here. And let's scroll up, change its color to something different. Perhaps a green. So you can just see how crazy this can become. Do this again, maybe change the select that color, and perhaps we choose a weird green. Let's make the pink color the top color. Move these around. This is going to be interesting layout. That's fine. So you get the idea. We can just use the satellite image for multiple different sort of masking techniques, and that's how that works, if that makes sense. So any questions there, or would you guys like me to go ahead and move on to probably more of the fun stuff? Well, I considered that pretty fun too. So, all right. So the first thing I want to do here is let's try to start off with, I like the idea of like black sand, perhaps in the sediment areas. So let's change this base color to be somewhere around a mid gray, just as a baseline to work off of. And we may or may not see this gray. It doesn't really matter. So let's add a new material. And let's specify this sand to be relatively dark. Pretty dark. And so one other little workflow I'd like to point out here is we're going to obviously add some textures to this, like real textures from Megascans library. But a good workflow practice that I would do is, and before diving in and adding all of the textures straight out, I would go through the process of adding and designing where the textures are going to go just based off color. So what we're going to be doing is doing all the texturing based off just the pure color first. And then we can go in and here in the albedo, normal, roughness, and ambient occlusion slots, replace these with real textures after we've already figured out where we want those to be distributed. So again, like if I wanted to figure out where this is going to be displayed, I could change it, like I said before, to that pure red. But since we've got a good contrast difference between this color and this color, I don't really need to do that yet. I usually use that little red color technique later on whenever we get more complex colors onto the terrain, and especially when you're zoomed in and you're only wanting to color like this little sliver, it can get quite tedious. Let's go, a half a quarter meter is fine. Let's leave that there. All right, so now let's go down to the distribution rules and let's change this dark color to fill in sort of the lower areas. So let's start off with doing it based off height. And let's lower the range here a little bit. All right, so I want the dark sand to kind of start off filling in this area. And then we can affect this edge here. So this edge is a really stark straight edge, but we can affect how that is going to be portrayed. And there's a couple of ways that we can do that. We can add another distribution rule. So let's just for fun add one that's called slope. And then see if I want this slope to be within the height as a direct influence, you can see it's staggered. Or if I want it to be a reference on its own, you see the biome is the parent actor, height and slope are the two child actors. And if I wanted slope to be a child influence of height, then I have to drag and drop it in there. So it's kind of like a layered grouping system on me almost. But if you don't have slope within the height slot here, you get this box. And this box is basically the layer operations on, just like in Photoshop. How do you want this to be connected to the previous filter? If you did slope within height, it's going to do a similar operation where it's just adding, it's sort of like a min operation or a multiply operation where it's going to, the height is going to be the underlining max and slope is going to be the secondary. So I can show those differences here. So let's take this slope all the way up to the max. So the slope range is now from 0 degrees to 90 degrees. And you can see that it's influencing everywhere exactly where the height is. If I were to drag the slope outside of height, you see nothing has changed because the layer is set to multiply. If I select add, well, it's going to overwrite that and add to it, obviously. Or if I select subtract, it's going to subtract from the height, so on and so forth. So there's some different sort of operations here to be aware of on how they operate. So multiply is the operation that's no different if slope was within height. So if I started to lower this slope a little bit, you can see that the slope range is only being affected within the maximum height boundaries of what is set by this height distribution rule. Make sense? I sure hope so. It seems pretty straightforward. It's nothing too terrible. So what we're actually going to do is the next way that we can influence this edge here is by effects. So the FX plus icon here within the height rule. So you have a list of different ones. And like I said yesterday, we're going to cover these more individually, but this can affect that boundary even more. So what these effects do is they're just different sort of quotations effects of within where the height selection is. But certain ones like flow here, for example, can affect obviously the edge of this max here. You see it's not so straight anymore, and we can feather that out if we want. Another good one is the distortion. So distortion here obviously distorts the edge, but you can control, this is really good for like snow and different rock formations and things like that, which we can definitely cover. We can change the distortion amount. So 0 is nothing. And you can see as I'm increasing the slider, how it's affecting that range. So if I were to slide it to here, perhaps, and add another distribution rule that is something like cavity, we can specify that the cavity, we want to, concave, step size. You can see how this is sort of adding together. So if I didn't have this distribution rule here, I right-clicked and duplicated it. If I double left-click, it sort of hides the effect of the rule. And if I double left-click again on distribution, it'll reenact that rule. If I double right-click on anything, it'll duplicate it. So right here, I'm just double left-clicking, and you can see the height range has a very sharp line. So I added the distortion effect to the height range, and then you can see how a little bit more natural that is to showcase. And this little pocket is really weird. I'm not sure why there's a square there. We may have to adjust some of our swirl filter settings, but let's look over here so we're not influencing the wrong thing. All right, so in the height range, also another way that we can affect that sort of boundary. So let me hide these real quick. Obviously, to help the effects overall, I can select the height range and adjust the top feather. So if I feather this up a little bit, you can see it's adding some of that gradient edge. Let's probably add just enough to get the sand up to where the rocks are. So I'm going to make these striations pretty rocky. So I'm going to increase the top end smoothness a little bit so that that blurred edge is right at the top here. Now, if we were to turn on distortion, you can see distortion is ever so subtle, or cavity. So now we've changed quite significantly. So let's go back to height. The main height here. Where was? So that was a weird bug. All right, so we have no influence here. We can start it this way if we wanted to and increase the height influence a little bit. And you can see right through here, it is increasing a little bit. And I believe this, the smoothness could be a little too much, or it could be a little too little. So let's turn off distortion and turn off cavity. So one way that we can even help that along is add another effect. And we can do a clamp. So let's put the clamp in front of the distortion, and then I'm doing that by moving it along. So clamp, and then now the full range of clamp is not doing anything. So if I lower this top end, you can see it's going in from the bottom. If I go in from the bottom slider here, it's sort of affecting that, how that smooth is from the very top, and so on and so forth. We can change the overall weight of that influence. Let's see what looks good. This quite isn't having sort of the same outcome that I imagined it would. Let's remove that. Let's add. Edge is pretty good. So let's try edge real quick. So edge strength. Edge is an interesting outcome because it can do a few different things. Definitely not a good example on there. I actually have a good pipeline for edge, and I'll share that later on. But let's make this blur to help our case out. Blur just a little bit, but more sharp. Yeah, there we go. Distortion amount. We can do a distortion quite heavily. And then cavity. Then let's take our height range and increase it ever so slightly. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want that super blurriness that see how blurry it is right through here. I still want it to be relatively sharp, but I don't want it to be too sharp like this. So if I just increase this ever so slightly, you can see it's feathered that edge just a little bit. All right, so this is a start. So what I want to also do is duplicate this color by double right clicking, and let's remove the sort of influences here. All right, so let's go to add distribution, and let's also do based off slope. So for this slope, let's influence most of this bottom area here. You see I'm filling in all the sloped areas. So let's fill in most of these bottom areas here. And then let's go to effects and start off with flow. And we want to change some of these settings here. So that is a little much. Let's see, smoothness. Smooth that out a little bit. All right, let's hide this color. Here we go. Hide the color, the first color that we did. So let's look at how the flow, go back to this color. Let's look how the flow is doing. So this is before, and you can see I'm doing slope based off a certain range. add a flow effect, and it's going to blur some of that a little bit, which is okay. Really, we wouldn't have to have the slope involved, to be honest. We could see the slope is just a little bit. So let's do that much here. All right, so go back to flow and we can adjust the overall weight of that. I don't mind it to be a little darker like this, potentially. Let's increase the weight. We're gonna do a nice, good, dark sedimentation layer here in just a little bit. Our iterations here is the amount of times that the flow effect is going to calculate the terrain. The default is, I believe it was 40. And the more iterations, the more sort of fluid is being collected like this. So if you really want to have a stark difference, just increase the iterations like this, and you can definitely get some really nice effects. It's actually not that bad. I want it to be subtle right now, and we'll duplicate this effect. So let's crank this back down to around 34. You can see I can increase that here. All right, velocity threshold is sort of the amount of water, so to speak. So I want to lower this a tad, and you can see sort of the influence it's having. Let's take a look at what it's doing up here. Let's move our light around, see what it's doing to the top. All right, let's use this lighting for now. All right, so this obviously probably looks a little bit heavy, but don't fret. We're going to adjust that in a little bit. And flow cutoff it's interesting. It talks about, it's kind of like a clamp for the water value. So it's not cutting off anywhere. It's obviously consuming everything. And how much you cut off the water is obviously how much it's going to pick up. So the higher the cutoff, the more like finer amounts of streams that you're going to create. So if you want to have a very subtle amount of flow to show, you can see it right here real easily. There's just an ever so slight amount that's showing, and that's all driven by this flow cutoff. So a little, like here's practically none, and a little bit is coming back into frame. I just want an ever so slight amount for now, because this is going to be like our liquid layer. Is this World Creator 3? Yes, it's World Creator 3, but it's being renamed to World Creator 2021. So you can see up here, this is World Creator 2021.0.7a, which is alpha. So this is the alpha, working alpha version of World Creator 2021. So yeah, still World Creator 3. That's just rebranding the name, so to speak. So while I'm texturing, if there is anything particular that you guys want to see more, just let me know and I'd be more than happy to do so. All right, so you can see that this sand is having a pretty stark effect on it. Another thing that I could do in this sort of color is under the cavity effects here. Let's change this to something like, let's try the difference between noise flow and, simple flow and noise flow. So simple flow, it's going to have this sort of effect. Let's see how well this pushes down. Yeah, it's probably a little too much. I like the sharpness a little bit better. Let's try small flow. All right, strength small flow is quite staggering. I think we're going to keep that there and introduce some noise offset. Maybe a little too much noise. So noise offset is an effect that I'm doing for the cavity. So it just adjusts the sort of, it adds a noise on top of everything. It's for its distribution. So as I increase this noise strength, you can see it's doing some really funky things. But I want this noise to be very, very subtle. Very, very subtle. Maybe even less than that. Maybe 0.01. Are there any features in the alpha that you're looking forward to? Definitely being able to custom mask. That's being able to paint in my own biome masks is one. Being able to add tile terrains is going to be a thing. Being able to change the terrain size for one. And presets. I think presets is a really powerful sort of feature that's coming. Is it possible to export to Unity in World Creator 2021? Yeah, there's one of the things that I was going to talk about tomorrow, which, like I said earlier, tomorrow's stream is going to be pushed a week from today or a week from tomorrow. I'm not quite sure. But this little save icon, this little floppy disk icon, since we talked about floppy disks, the floppy disk icon here is the export section. We're going to cover that later, but in the export presets, you can create your own sort of pipelines for what you want to export. And right now, like to export things, it's all manual. So you'd have to export the height map, you have to export the textures, the splat maps, whatever, all manually. And you'd have to import those manually into whatever program like Unity. There isn't sort of a workflow yet for clicking a button and it just automatically sending everything to Unity like there was in World Creator 2. That's kind of on the back burner pipeline. It's going to happen, but not immediate. Let's see here. I think this sand, this flow needs less cutoff. I think we need to make, here we go. This is looking better. More sand flow. I'm actually going to duplicate this sand color, remove this effect, and have, where are you? Cavity. Have the cavity be concave. Step size is quite striking. And then we will change this a cavity based on, let's do it based off, let's see, which one did I want it to do again? All right, let's do it based off slope. So we can increase this slope value here. Why is there? Let's sort of like that. I don't like that edge. I think combining biomes will be awesome. So you could combine your previous creations. Yeah, that's where presets are going to be. So if you design a biome, you can save that particular biome, and that biome could be, stacked with filters, stacked with textures, and whatever you create can be set as a preset. And you can merge that with other biomes in certain ways. We're actually going to, in the next episode of this, we're going to cover biomes specifically on how to do that sort of thing without custom bioming. Yeah, but the export is horrible at the moment. Yeah, they know that. The export is not super feasible right now, but we're going to at least attempt some working with it. All right, so this one, I'm going to duplicate this again. And the only thing I'm going to do here is, in this one, we're just going to do this straight off slope, and we're going to change the slope range. So let's make the slope range really tight. So a good rule of thumb is to have multiple areas, multiple textures of the same sort of texture that cover different effects, and you can merge those together. So you can see here, I'm just changing these this color is exactly the same sort of settings as this one, except I removed the slope. This color, this top color, is just pure slope altogether. So having multiple variations of slope for the same texture is a good idea at blending effects. So for example, if I were to duplicate this top color again by double right clicking, we can adjust, let's say we want some more sand in this top end here. We can change this pipeline even further. I think that right there works. Okay. And Ue5 coming out. Man, this industry is so exciting. Yes. Ue5 is coming out. I don't know exactly if I'm allowed to say when, but soon. I do work for the Quixel and Epic Games guys, so I've had my hand in some of that stuff already, and I gotta say Ue5 is looking pretty sharp. There will be an early access for it first before it being full-fledged, but soon, very, very, very soon is all I can say. All right, real quick, let's switch gears here. So this sort of sand color is a good start right now. I really like black sand for some reason. So the sand color is covering most of where I would imagine, obviously, sand to be covering. And you can see that has taken up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 textures worth of textures. It'd be nice, as we've talked about yesterday, if I can select all of these and group them as one group, and I can name that group as sand. I'm going to lay out some of these things for the developers of this so that we can group these things and have more layer functionality. So like say this layer, if I want it to, as a layer whole, be multiplied differently to the layer below, that's sort of where rules are. The rules here on how they're distributed is kind of that thing on where they're at, especially since those functions like Photoshop are already in here. Possibly getting those to apply to the layer stack here would be really nice, particularly grouping. I mean, grouping and being able to affect the group as a whole is another feature I would like to add that I'm really looking forward to. So grouping all these textures and having a mask as a group or a distribution rule as a group for these textures. All right, so let's add a new texture. And this time, since we've got a lot of different variations going on here, I'm going to do that little trick I mentioned before. I'm going to change this color to pure red so that, wow, that's bright. So that I can see what I'm doing. And this time I'm wanting to add the rock color. And I want to do that specifically to these areas. Now, one way that I can do that is let's start off by distribution based off height. And let's make sure that I check this slider. Yeah, let's ensure that we're affecting all of these striation areas first. So cover the zone like this. And I believe I'm going to verify that that's covering all of the striation effects. We can leave those. I don't think there's any there. There's some here. There's a little bit there. All right. So I think we've covered the basis of where those striations occur. And the reason why we want to do that is, again, the height selection is just going to mask in the area where we want the other effects to begin, so to speak. All right. So the next rule that we could start by trying, and with texturing, it's trial and error. You're not going to get the exact distribution rule on the first shot. A lot of this is just learning from, again, trial and error. So if I want to say have this red color appear on a certain face of all these striations, well, my logic would tell me that let's add a new distribution rule and base it off angle. So we're going to base it off an angle. And you can see automatically that the red is being applied to a certain side already. It's actually interesting that it's picked that instantly. But we can adjust that angle. So here's the angle slider. We can adjust which face this is going to occur. So let's have it adjust this side. So the left side here, we're going to have it adjust that color. So everything on the left side of this rock face is going to be this red color. And now let's go through the process of eliminating some of these obtuse edges. So we can do that by, obviously, let's try out, let's actually do this height select and go to distortion. And that is distorting a little bit too much. So the height range, let's try. I don't want to do flow. Edge is, not edge again. This might be some trial and error. Too smooth. Okay, so let's actually just do a whole new distribution rule based off. Try slope again. Let's set slope on its own course. All right, let's set the maximum height so the texture covers most of this edge. And let's increase this pipeline here. It's still not covering fully what I want yet, but it's a start. There we go. All right, let's see. FX Edge. Yeah, so Edge, I'll have to showcase Edge here in just well, we could try and do that. So if we were to say, let's do Edge on the whole biome, how does that work out? So what Edge does is it finds the sort of edges, it highlights the edges of the mask itself. So if you have a mask, like here, it'll pinpoint the edges, but it does it in more of a, you see what it's doing here? It's finding all of the sort of really contrasty parts of what mask you've created, and it's highlighted those, and you can remove part of it. So edge strength, if I want to just pinpoint pieces of the edge or make the edge fully capable, this is really good for highlighting, but it's not the sort of filter or effect that I was really hoping for this. Let's see, I've just started using World Creator, evaluating it for our studio. So I'm unsure about everything it can do, but I've found granular control on the map to be quite difficult. So anything that requires slightly tighter spaces or specific platformed areas in natural ridges seems hard to achieve. Am I missing an obvious tool? The diamonds that control the landscape are quite broad, even when at max count. Yeah. I would say in World Creator 2, let me think about this, because a lot of it is trial and error even for me, but the diamonds in World Creator 2 is not sort of the area of control that I normally do. I usually sculpt that control manually. So I'll create an area, like in the areas tab, create an area, maximize that area to cover the entire terrain, specify that area to have has height map, and remove like clear out the height map so that you can have custom control, and then set the level step slider to like 9 or 10 or somewhere on the top end of whatever your max count is, and then start sculpting. And you can sculpt at a really high precision level at that point. It's not going to be procedural if that's what you're after. It'll be more of a custom sculpt piece. And if people have interest in me showing that in Roll Creator 2, I can do a dedicated how-to sculpting stream on that. I think one of my tutorials covers sculpting, but not to the degree of a studio workflow. I've helped some studios out on sculpting pipelines, but that's one of them. I usually hand sculpt everything in World Creator 2. I would use those diamonds only as a means to design the main volume of the terrain. It's not going to be your guide for shaping more granular areas. And another thing for granular areas is being able to control the filters. The filters are going to have a sort of influence on that too, but that's for a different sort of issue altogether. All right, so let's say we want multiply. All right, now let's try. Yeah. So this is what I was thinking we would need. So here in this height range, since height was the first one, see, this is some trial and error stuff. Since height was the first one that we established, and let's hide slope here because we may not need slope. And angled was the child actor of the height. That sort of pipeline that we tested with the distortion to distort the edge of the height map. If we clear this, you can see it's going to do all the funky chicken here, but that's because this distortion is affecting the angle. See, if I were to uncheck the angle, you can see the distortion is only happening right here at the height edge, which is obviously what we want. And the angle, we only want the angle to affect the angle and not be distorted. Well, the angle is being distorted because it's underneath as part of a child layer to the height. So if we move the angle to either above the height or below the height as its own distribution altogether, and then we select, instead of multiplying, we select add, you see it's going to add to the whole effect. But we still want the height to be an underlying condition of where it's being applied to. Because as you can see, if by me selecting add, it's going to obviously add more to the angle than what we want. So by moving angle to above height, the height value is selected to multiply. If it were selected to add, you can see the height is going to just add on top of whatever the angled is going to be doing, which it's angled is going to be distributed across the entire terrain. But we want the angled to still be distributed only to the height location. So the height, let's multiply that. And so that is going to remove, that's basically going to remove the influence of angled being anywhere other than where height is. So now the distortion is only being affected for the height sort of distribution rule. If I were to put slope above height as well and multiply those, it'll be the same story. But I think in this case, let's go ahead and keep slope in there. And distortion, let's see. No distortion, a lot of distortion. Let's say that the distortion is a little bit, and then for the regular height, let's just go ahead and increase its sort of area here. Be closer to the top. And then let's try to do another effect. Possibly, let's try directional blur just a tad. And we'll stick with that. Right. Perhaps adjust this angle a little bit. A lot of trial and error here. I think maybe the angle will work better on this side. Yeah. I think the angle will work a little bit better on this side for now. We're going to add some more textures on top of this. Actually, let's just for fun's sake test what this texture looks like underneath here. Underneath the sedimentation. I were to reverse that angle back to where we had it. All right, that's not bad. So what we're going to do now is let's keep this here. So the rock is going to be on the left side. Let's keep this here for now. And I'm going to double right click and duplicate our red. Let's move this red to the top. You can see it's really adding some of that here. And let's change the, where are we at here? Let's change the overall biome strength. Actually, that is the overall, let's see. Here we go. That's where I want. The overall strength for the whole color is going to be the settings value down here in the bottom. So if we removed that influence a little bit, I still want it to be influenced. So let's add, how about whirly noise as a main contributing factor. Scale, let's make this really small. It was pretty high, actually. Let's see. That is a very interesting looking direction. Not just messing around with trying to figure some different effects out. I'm trial and erroring this hardcore right now. Let's see. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So that's what I'm doing is basically, so I'm going to double click this texture and then selecting the angle, and I'm going to change the angle to be on the other side, basically. Where are you at? I think I am changing way too much here. Hold on. Don't know why. So this one's 162. Oh, what happened to my angle? May have found a little bug. Let's move this to the top and see. I think it's not a bug. It might be the I have found a weird circumstance. I don't know what the heck just happened. My favorite method, trial and error, my favorite method to do things, especially first person character controls. Yeah, that's for sure. All right, I am not exactly sure what the heck there was. All right, so we know that this was 162. So I'll show this as a case. So 162, let's remove height because I think height was doing some funky Oh, I know what it is. Height isn't, there we go. For some reason, the multiply thing was not coming in. I see why that is. That was a bug. When I moved this around, the multiply wasn't showing in. Okay, let's go back to what we were trying to do now. So angle was, I believe, 162 something. And what I like to do is double right click, duplicate this. And for the new angle, change that to the other side. So this angle, change it to this side so we can see what we're doing. There we go. So we've got the angle now to the right side. And this one, this top one has the angle to the left side. Let's change the color so that we could easily see what in the world we're doing here. All right, so blue is obviously the angle on the left and red is the angle on the right. We're going to combine these colors here in a little bit, or slightly different colors. So I like what blue is doing. I'm sorry, what red is doing in this case a whole lot more than what blue is doing. Let's see, distortion scale is very fine. Distortion amount. There we go. All right, let's go to blue now. Trial and error is the best method. All right, we're on blue, on height, we're on distortion. So distortion scale, let's crank this up. And distortion amount. Crank that up too. And I'm also going to add a noise offset for this height range. So you can see it's adding this noise range here. So noise strength. See how that noise that it's adding there. So let's pepper that just a little bit so that maybe we can have the rocks be less, weird looking. All right, we can do that. Let's go over here and do the same thing for the red color. Red, we selected height. And let's go to noise offset. Noise offset strength. Oop, my bad. Sorry for that. All right. See, the slider is adding a little bit of noise to that distortion. So let's add a touch of noise there. All right. I think we've sort of pegged most of the rock situation here. So in most cases, actually, hold on. I'll probably add another rule. Actually, hold on. Let's move. Let's see what blue does there. I want some sedimentation to kind of bleed into the blue right here. And I know some of the higher amounts of sedimentation did that. Maybe it's that one here. Perfect. Yeah, I want some sedimentation to kind of have some hierarchy over the edge. All right. Are you guys completely confused now? Oh, man. Trial and error really took a number on us, didn't it? All right. So now let's change this color to be something more on the gray side. So actually, let's change it to be a little bit this color, a little bit that color. And maybe we make this side a touch darker. getting there on somewhere on the lines. Maybe, let's see if we created it. Oh, let's not do that color. I like the full saturated look, but I want a touch bit of that there. Let's change this color to be, let's see. A touch that color too. A touch this color, a touch that. Happy accidents, guys. All right. Very interesting stuff. So part of me has some of this, let's see. See, this is exactly why having the super stark color of red, being able to see what you've affected is really important. Let's move the sun around. See, the sun direction makes a big difference too. See, in this direction, it's kind of a little, this color is a little too light. Perhaps, I think it's that color, yeah. Maybe desaturate it a little bit. Just trying to make it a very subtle little case. All right, remember that this is the one, which color had the flow? Okay, this one had the flow. All right, so let's see. Let's try and get to the direction of some reflection. So since this one had the flow, let's change its roughness. Let's just go all the way down real quick and try and look at where the flow is based on the sun. So let's move this texture up. There we go. So the flow is going to be super reflective right now. What I like to do is take flow, actually, right there. Colors are really hard to see. All right, so this color, that's the flow, all this liquid looking reflections right here. The roughness is nothing, so it's a perfect mirror. So if I were to say, lower this reflection just a tad, we're just lowering that reflection ever so slightly. If we were to do more, you can see the reflection is changing more and more and more. But what I want to do now is I want to, at this point, let's say it's super reflective. All right, I want to copy this reflective part. So I'm going to double right click this texture. All right, so now this texture is right here. I'm going to move it to the very top for now. I'm going to go back to the first one, and then we're going to reduce its flow to be next to nothing because I want the actual liquid layer to be really fine-tuned. So let's go back to this super red color here. So I'm glad you guys are very patient right now. All right, so now we're going to make super small looking streams. So go back to this flow and then this flow cutoff. We're going to make relatively tiny streams. Let's maybe say the iterations aren't as high. Smoothness is up just a notch. And I don't know if I've said this before. Obviously, this looks like garbage right here, but when you add a touch of smoothness, it feathers out the erosion a little bit. It looks so much better. And flow smoothness is the overall flow smoothness. So let's crank that back up. What I'm doing now is really highlighting the wet areas. All right, here we go. And then let's change the slope to be more lower, so to speak. So let's increase this. All right, and then I want this to be distributed based off of height as well. So let's start there. And we'll lower this value till we see it's gone. All right, so height, we want it to start up about midway up the range. Somewhere right there is fine. And smooth out that top end just ever so slightly. Perfect. So what is in red is going to be the super reflective surface. And let me find the sun angle to see that. All right, you can kind of see the red here. I'll turn this all the way up. Kind of see the red here is a little reflective. So let's now make this, if we make this pure black from the top side, the reason why we make it pure black is because the top side is going to look like that sand is a little bit damp. You can see the black sand is just ever so slightly damp. But in reflections, you can see it's reflecting the water or the dampness of the terrain. All right. Well, wow, we've been going for an hour and 14 minutes. All right, so I think what I'm gonna have to do is, because I'd love to go on a lot longer, but it has quite obvious to me that I'm not gonna finish all the texturing today. So what we'll do is a week from today, I'll try to continue the texturing part of this. And a week from tomorrow, we'll do this sort of biome part. We might be able to put the biome part in the first episode too. We'll just see where we get with the texturing. But real quick before we depart, for the rocks though, let's see, this rock in particularly. Let's go ahead and just pick a rock from Megascans and kind of plug that into where this brown color is. Yeah. All right. So we're here in Quixel Bridge right now. I'm going to go to surfaces and let's see. Let's obviously go to rock. Let's try, I like jagged better. So, or perhaps let's go back to, wait a minute. Let's check out what lava has. I want something. Slate shell beach cliff, layered cliff rock. Icelandic jagged. I kind of like the Icelandic stuff. Let's go to let's go down to collections, environment, nature, Iceland. All right, that one's not bad. I want something to kind of go along with my striations a little bit. To kind of aid with that sort of angle. And we can adjust that angle in World Creator as well. This could be some cracked cliff. This might be some trial and error. I'm picking the right material. Let's scroll up. So lots of materials here. All right, I think, where was that one? right, let's just for time's sake, let's pick this one. 2K is fine. So let's go ahead and download this one. Yeah, the Icelandic stuff they have is pretty amazing. All right, so I've downloaded it. Actually, I didn't check to see albedo. Okay, well, we definitely have all the textures that we need. All right, so for this particular texture, I'm going to right-click it, click Go to Files. So here is where those files are. So all I'm going to do is here in World Creator, you see the albedo, normal, roughness, and ambient occlusion are blank. So I'm going to drag and drop the albedo texture that I just downloaded from Bridge. It's really that easy. There's no ridiculous pipeline to figure out like in World Creator 2. So I'm just going to drag and drop the albedo straight over on top of the square for albedo. Loading. And it should have automatically imported all those, but that's okay. There we go. It grabbed the roughness and ambient occlusion along with that, like it was supposed to. It's supposed to fill in automatically. I think albedo is just, this is based off color. So albedo was a different case. Anyway, you can see now we've got that texture right here. But let's change its scale. Let's scale it up a fair bit. All right, and is gloss on off? All right, so UV scale. Maybe we make it touch bigger, and you'll be able to adjust the sort of orientation of the texture, but obviously it's not right now. Maybe that won't work. We can adjust the normal strength of it. So the normal strength is automatically at 1. We can really increase that or decrease that to effect. So I think a normal strength of like 1.5 is usually a fair bet with these textures. Obviously, this is a little wonky right here. I'm going to have to later remove this. I don't like how where that's at. And we may have to adjust some of these a little bit more. Also, the color here, I believe, is wildly influencing the, yeah. So if you have the color here, the top set to pure white, it's going to bring in the albedo at 100% of whatever the albedo's lighting and colors are. But you can influence that color, obviously, by making it match a little bit closer to your scene. I don't think this was the right texture to choose. It's a bit too rocky for this case. Maybe if I increase the UV scaling up a lot, maybe that'll help, but I don't know. There's obviously going to be some tiling issues with this face. So you get the idea there. I personally like doing colors to begin with. Sets a good precedent for how to do it. All right, let's choose another one just for fun. Let's just go to those lavas, the lava color again. Rock, lava. All right, let's close out of this. All right, let's see how. Oh, this is a good one. So let's download this one. Download, and then let's find whichever one is, let's see. Yeah, let's get this one. Well, hold on. Which one is this? That's that. Actually, that's a good one. We'll choose this one right here. We'll choose a sand to implement this texture, this Icelandic rocky ground. Right click, go to files, drag over albedo, and I'll drag over the normal and it'll populate the rest. Alrighty, so now obviously everything that's black is this texture, but it's black here. So if I change this to white, and then UV scaling, here we go. So UV scaling up a little bit. Maybe it's a lot of UV scaling. See, now we're starting to get some stuff going. We're getting there. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on this again next week. It won't be Monday because Monday's Memorial Day and I'll be out. So I'm going to continue this texturing pipeline here next week because obviously I did not have enough time today to do this. It's kind of what happens with trial and error and us having fun and being laid back. And I hope you guys still enjoy this sort of method. I had nothing prepared for this. I just wanted to play around, have fun, answer questions, do this for you anytime. And yeah, is there any, let me go ahead and save this because heaven forbid I don't save this and I lose everything I just worked on. So we'll continue texturing this next week for sure. But is there any last minute questions or quick things that you guys wanted me to share with you real quick before we ended today's stream? Oh yeah. What I'll do is I will share this. I'm going to edit the filter a little bit to work out, but I'll share this texture with and without textures. I think the important thing is to share it without the textures anyway, just so that you can see what all of the colors are going to do by themselves, because the textures, as you can see, are going to make a striking difference. Some of them work, some of them don't. I think this rock ground texture worked phenomenally right here. Like this piece here looks a whole lot better than the first texture I chose. So yes, to answer your question, I will share this with and without the textures. Well, thank you. I love that you guys are here. I'll try and do this every week for you guys. It's a lot of fun to do. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining. I will see you guys next week.